thing I did was determine what the minimum size, because this is a scrappy quilt, so I expect you'll be using leftovers from your stash. So I measured each piece, and here's your pieces for the SteamPunk. I measured each piece to see how much I would need for one block. On the A piece, which is in this unit, is this piece right here. One of them, 4 3/4 by 4 3/4. That's only for one piece. If I cut a 4 3/4 by 12.5 inch strip like this, I could get all 4 pieces. And the spinning mat is invaluable. This line right here, I drew a line on some of my fabrics, this one. I wanted to have this centered. So what I did is measure halfway in between these two little holes and made a mark and connected it with the hole down here and drew a line. And that way when I cut these out, I could line it up exactly on the pattern. This is a Stabilo white pencil. It comes out with water. It will rub off, and if I had a little bit of water, it would just disappear. I use it to mark fabric and templates. Okay, this particular piece has fabric all around it, so the grain's not too important. But when I cut a strip like this, I do care about the grain. Oh, and I use the 28mm Rotary Cutter. The 45 is a little bit too big, I think, for some of these curves. And at times I did cut multiple layers, but when I got to the corners, because I like chopping off these little corners, they help you line up your pieces. And when I had a whole stack of fabric, they didn't always come clean. So there's one, and then I line up the next one. I can line it right along that cut edge. Oops. But see, oh. And I just go straight down. If I wasn't nervous, it would be easier. And you get all 4. So that was 4 3/4 by 12.5. Then the B piece, which is this one, I want you to notice these aren't budging, and it's because I sprayed a little bit of this Grippy non-stick coating on the back. It does wear off, it doesn't transfer to the fabric, it doesn't hurt it. It's made to use on acrylic templates, but the overspray could get really tacky. So what I do is lay it on a piece of paper inside my garbage can and lightly spray the back. And now when I put this on there, it doesn't move. Okay, so piece B, 2 inch by 5 inch, we'll cut 1 unit, and don't be afraid to mix and match and make these as crazy as you want. So 2 by 5 for 1 unit. A 3.5 by 10 will give me enough fabric to cut all 4 units. And then I cut the little points. You notice that this has holes in it in all the corners. If you're going to hand piece these, then those become critical. But for machine piecing, I don't worry about marking them. So the next one, there's one. And the next one. See how nice this turning mat is? I have one of those older ones. This is a new product from OmniGrid, and they had a square one, but it was always bumping things all over my table. So when they came out with this one, and it turned so much smoother too, I really like it. Okay, there's two. So it really, you can see it doesn't take very long to cut these out. And there's my next one and my next one. So you cut 4 of those, 4 of A, 4 of B, 4 of C, and 4 of D. Okay, C is the corner. Now I do like to have the straighted grain on the outside of my blocks, so I do worry about that. The C piece, a 3.5 by 4.5, will do 2 pieces, 2 corners, and so notice that the grain is out here. And here's the next corner. See, it'll just snug right up. This one has hardly any waste at all. To get all 4 corners, a 3.5 by 9.5. Or just cut it. If you've got big yardage, sometimes I have little pieces and I'm trying to see if, you know, what I can get out of them. I save way too much fabric. So there you can see, and then the next 2 will come out of this. The last piece is D. And let's look back on here. Here's the C's, A, B, C, and here's D. And it does have straighted grain. And I want the straighted grain out here. So D, a 4 by 5 will cut 1 unit. A 5 by 10 will cut all 4 units because we can alternate them and go back and forth. Okay, and then the next one, just line it up. Make sure your straighted grain is where you want it to be, which is this outside edge. And now we have all the pieces. Well, we'll pretend like we have all the pieces, but 4 of each of those, and that's what you need for 1 block. Now the last piece is E, and it's a circle. And it's even though this is a little rotary cutter, I would go to the tinier one if I was going to cut around this, because it's tight enough that I'd kind of have to chew it. So what I prefer to do is take a template, and I have this big one. You get them at Staples or Hobby Lobby, and I took my piece and I went, oh look, it's 2 3/4. So then I drew it, and I'll cut right outside of it. So it gives me a bigger seam allowance, but that includes the seam allowance. So that's 2 3/4. Now when I look at 2 1/4, I can lay that on there and I see, well, the finished size is 2 1/4. And that's great. So and this doesn't have to be perfect, because what I did is use perfect circles. And if you want a different size circle, do a different size circle. But this is how I do all my applique circles. So I cut it out with scissors. It's good TV work. And that's going to go in the center. So you can see, well, in my perfect circles, I laid each one on there and discovered that this one was exactly the size of the finished circle for this project. So I can gather the edge and pull it up and press it. Only use a medium iron. If you use a really hot iron, you warp your perfect circles. And I know that from experience. But what I did, so here you can see I've gathered that. I spritz it with, this was inside. Oh, let me open it up. Can you see my gatherings? Okay. So once it was basted, I pulled my thread up and went over to the iron. And on the ironing board, I pull it like this and hold my basting as tight as I can and press it really good. Turn it over, I still hold that cord, press it with a medium iron, and then let it completely cool and dry before I take that perfect circle out. Let me show you one more thing. I'm kind of jumping to the end here. You might get a whole bunch of really good perfect points coming together, but this is what really makes it attractive, I think. And it says to center the circle. Well, that's pretty hard when you can't see where the center is. So another thing I do when circles have to be centered, I lay it in my template and see these little tick marks. That was this same pencil that I used to mark. I just put little tick mark in each quarter. Then when I lay it on my block, I can match those up with edges. And I know that this will be centered. There. So see how those little tick marks line up? And I use Roxanne's glue or Jill Lily's glue and put little dots in the seam allowance and put it down, and then I can hand or machine sew that circle down, and it will be centered because I've got those tick marks to go by. Okay, that's all the cutting. Now I'll show you how I sew one of the blocks.